Hi, everyone. I've had an amazing time here. I don't know about you. And I would like to talk today about a sort of bigger vision of where I think apps are going, not just in the next 2 or 3 years, but 5 and 10 years. And yeah, lots has changed in the last year, as I think a lot of us have realized. And I think what I hope this will do is somehow connect the dots in our minds and stimulate us to think about what we can do and how we can apply that back to Urbit. So this is called the future of apps. I spend a lot of time thinking about 3 things. One is how we can do work better, how we can do full-time jobs better, how we can move away from full-time jobs entirely and work in a different way. Another one is how we can meet people. You know, you can call it dating, but I call it meeting, because the events I go to are often so big, I don't have time to talk to everyone. And I really want to know, like, who's on my wavelength. That's something I'm going to talk about a lot more this year. But this app is about my real sort of love of the future of computing and where I think that's going to go in the future. So we're going to talk about apps and UI and blockchain and AI, how they're going to mesh together and how we're going to interact with computers in the future, and what I perceive to be the biggest sort of opportunity in technology today. And all of that, hopefully, will come back to how it relates to Urbit. Okay, so we're going to start with what exactly are apps, because a lot of people talk about apps. It's like, oh, I'm making an app, and is it, you know, have you got an app for that, and so on. But we don't really think too much about what they are. And until we start thinking about them, we can't really think about how we can progress and change that. So from a technical sort of perspective, obviously it's a program and user space. You know, we've got user space, we've got kernel space, we've got a whole series of APIs that the operating system provides us that we build upon. Would you say this is an app? I think kind of it's like an app, but when most people say I'm using an app, they don't really mean that. They mean they're using something like this, which I call a box. Yeah, boxes basically have defined what apps are. So really from the very beginning, from the Lisa, here we go. You know, the whole idea is that when we think of an app, we think of a box, right? This is how apps are. And of course now, like, everybody uses apps. And again, everyone is clicking on boxes. So store that, because we're going to get back to that. Another thing about an app is that it's designed to fulfill a goal. So the way I organize my sort of phone is around verbs. It's like, well, I'm thinking of staying, I'm thinking of traveling, I want to be entertained. So I sort of go around verbs and goals. This is like my folder for listening to music, right? It's or anything like that. Another way of thinking about apps is as a human interface into data. So we can't understand binary code, so we need some sort of way into that binary. So what we do is we build these interfaces. Now, if you give a back-end engineer a task to build an interface, 100% it's going to look like this. And the reason is, it took me a while to figure this out, right? But back-end engineers have been trained throughout their entire life to optimize for efficiency. So when they come to design interfaces, their whole mindset is to cram as much interface on screen as possible. That's what they're thinking. If you ask a designer to build the same thing, they're going to build something like this. And they have been trained throughout their entire life to think about readability. It's like, what is important? Let's put the most important stuff at the top, and then all the less important stuff we're going to gray out and put at the bottom. Designers realize that apps, above all, are emotional experiences. And good design means you think about the emotions of the person using the app when they're clicking the buttons. With crypto, it's really more important than ever, because we're dealing with sending money around and things like that. In fact, any time that money is part of the equation, designers really need to get involved and think, how are you going to feel if an error message pops up, especially if it's a large amount. So the apps we use today, well, this is, you know, all the friends of ours outside of this Urbit bubble are going to be using apps like this. They look like this, and they started, as we know, in 2008 with the launch of the App Store. I don't know if anyone remembers this, but this was one of the first ones to come out. It did nothing apart from show that you were rich. And then I lived all through this, as I'm sure lots of us did, the Angry Birds and then the Flappy Bird era. And after the launch of the App Store, it was getting pretty clear and very obvious that apps were going to be a thing. And indeed they are. They're ubiquitous now. The App Store gave us the first and easy way to monetize an app. For the first time, developers who currently had no intention of ever learning this weird new language started realizing there was money to be made, and they went and learned this thing, Objective-C. Something to think about, right? Everyone had ideas for an app. All my friends, when the app stores came out, were like, hey, I want to make an app like this, I go do this for my dog, and blah, 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 blah. It was really a great time to be alive because everyone thought for the first time they could finally have an app on the App Store and make some money. Of course, the reasons were different. I want to be rich, I want to create things, and I want to solve problems for other people. But these days, what I've noticed is that nobody says anything anymore. Nobody comes up to me anymore and says, I want to make an app. And the reality of creating an app today is that building an app, sadly, also means that you have to build a business too. And not everyone wants to do that. Some people will say, well, you just need to teach yourself to code. It's so easy, right? We can all go to, it's never been simpler. And in some ways, it's true. But you may boot me out at this point, but I'm just not a big fan of coding. I just never have been. I've done it all my life, and I do it to build products to put into people's hands. But never once have I sat down and thought, we're at the pinnacle of human-machine interaction here. Type in English language into text files. Some people have also realized this too. Even if you can code, even if you're one of the lucky ones in this room who know how to code and do a full-stack app, great. But you'll realize that soon this is only part of a much bigger problem. To make an app on the App Store today means that you have to go way beyond coding, and you have to start looking into all of these things. This is just like a regular sort of like Uber, Airbnb sort of marketplace app. All of this costs a lot of money. And even the most skilled indie developers like Levels.io, who made this amazing avatar AI well before anyone else, have realized that it's very expensive and hard work. Most of us have no other option to go to some sort of angel and VC and go in that begging mindset of like, please, sir, give me something. I've got this big dream, but I need to do something with it. Even if you do get the money, how much of this stuff can you actually build in-house? Very little. I've got this little photo app that some of you have seen, and this is what I pay just to get this thing up and running, right? You're paying endless SaaS subscriptions just to basically do all the basic plumbing that an app needs. And behind all of these SaaS companies is really just 3 companies that host all of this data. What this means is a lot of apps just don't get made. Things that have a market reach of like 10 people, like why would you make an app for that? It's just never going to get funded. And even the sort of really best indie developer apps, well, what happens is that they eventually get out-competed by much bigger teams, which is actually what happened to Levels.io when Lenza started hitting the marketplace and basically destroyed his business. So the upshot of all of this is that millions of really good ideas never get made. But the desire to create new apps hasn't ever gone away. In fact, if you are a non-designer, what you'll do is you'll play with something like Balsamic and you'll do wireframes like this. And if you are a designer, you'll do high-def designs like this in Figma. But there's a problem with this, which is that you can't take them anywhere else. They're kind of living in Figma and they look oh so beautiful. But then you try and turn that into an Android and an iOS app, good luck with that. Maybe you'll find some plugin that gets you so far, but then you'll never be able to do all the other things you want to do with it. So the desire to create hasn't gone away, but it has laid dormant, I would say, really since 2008, for all these years, until, as you know, what's coming. Last year was a really interesting time, because for the very first time, people who could not code felt the first hope that maybe they can actually make something themselves. This is called Galileo, by the way, and this exports designs directly into Figma, But as we've just said, once you're in Figma, you can't get out into an actual app. So it's one step further for sure. It's better than nothing, but it's not ideal. Okay, so I'm not going to bore you with all of this because we've all seen it, but I did put a few of the absolute best ones on. This one here where the Replit guy has uploaded a screenshot of a problem to the AI, which has debugged the screenshot and told them how to fix the code. Pretty amazing. This sneaker, which was designed purely by prompts on Bing and Midjourney. Now, most of the coding by app stuff, like how do we make apps using AI, is going to start with conversations that look like this. It's like, how do we make this better? How do we make this React code like more of a thing? And like I say, lots of people now are thinking, okay, there maybe is some hope here. And I think in Silicon Valley right now, like everyone in the VCs have all been told you have to invest in AI. Like whatever's got AI on will get the money right now. And I'm sure a lot of money is being spent on AI app development platforms. So in a few years' time, I do suspect that most people here will be able to make apps. But here's the thing, right? Is this really what we want? Because the thing about apps is, well, there's a few things. Every single platform in the world still is completely fixated with this one app, one square model. And the idea is that you click the app and you go into a world that is created by the app developer. And this is really good for some things like focus. You can have full screen experiences and games and videos and so on. But there's a real problem with this. And that this app shiny interface is basically on all platforms, no exceptions, designed to gather up your data and suck it inside. And what we find here is that most of the apps operate like this. There's a really nice fancy restaurant to go to. You think it's a great place to hang around in. But you find out that you can't ever get your data out because most of them don't have APIs at all. Occasionally, you may get lucky and maybe the EU's mandated that something like Facebook builds a button like this, export my data. And you click the button and you're taken to what I can only describe, if you ever do this, and I have, the back end of the restaurant that's never been refurbished. Like it was last maintained about 15 years ago. And what you end up with, if you're lucky, is this sort of load of JSON. And what you realize, and Ted said this ages ago, and I totally agree, is that data is useless without code. Absolutely useless. So we end up with islands of data. This is what your phone looks like. Islands of data, sucking up data that you don't own and control because it's all stored on the cloud. And none of the islands even talk together. Reddit and Twitter don't talk together, and Instagram doesn't talk together. But that's not all. The App Store, as amazing as it was, has led to lots of other issues. The first, of course, is that it's very easy, as we found in the last few years, to be deplatformed just by saying the wrong thing. It's very easy as well to start putting your data into an app that eventually gets discontinued. Last November, I did a talk at ETH Brno in the Czech Republic. And I told everyone to go and use this amazing app that I'd found out about. You know, I really liked how they raised money and so on. And of course, lots of people did. They put the data into the system, only to find out 2 weeks ago it's now been discontinued. What happens to the data now? Well, luckily, they've thought through this, and there's a migration plan, but normally you're not so lucky. But the most crazy thing, and I just can't understand why anyone even tolerates this, is what I call the most deranged part of apps. You know those T's and C's that nobody ever read? Well, inside that, it says that the startup has the permission to basically take all of your data and sell it to someone that you've never heard of, anytime they like. And this happens all the time. It's like, it's just a normal thing that you wake up and you see, hey, we've just been bought. A good site that logs this, by the way, is called Our Incredible Journey. And they just they log how every time a startup sells to a big tech company, time and time again. It's the whole VC model is built on this idea of acquiring data and users. But of course, the main reason that this sucks is you may not even get your app on the App Store at all, as we find out with anything that's touching the edges of the sort of power sensors, like, for example, this app, which is a really good client for Nostra, the new sort of Twitter clone, which didn't survive very long in China. So as a sort of like Ethereum person, I would say, like who loves the Ethereum community, we tend to sort of dunk a lot on Solana. But I have to say that they're the only people I've ever seen who've figured this out and have actually realized that we need to have an app store which is consumer friendly and isn't going to ban anything to do with crypto, or isn't going to ban anything that's on their arbitrary Apple list. So something to think about. Okay, so enough about apps and iOS and so on. What about the web? Surely the web will save us, right? Well, I've been doing web stuff. I'm mostly, I would say, a web programmer. And I've been doing web stuff literally since this browser, which, as far as I know, didn't have CSS in it. I certainly was doing it before CSS. And unlike when you're making apps for sort of native mobile platforms, where you've really basically got 4 choices, on the web, you've just got a myriad of choices. I'm sure I could like put 100 different technologies on here. And then, of course, you've got to deal with this as well. So the main problem, of course, is that HTML was never designed for documents. And every single bastardization, every React and every different framework that's gone on top has all been sort of just stacked on top, and it's an absolute mess. I don't know how anyone would actually become a web programmer now, starting from scratch. You know, good luck to them. That's why I'm a massive fan of Liam's initiative with native UI. I really think we need this. I think it's a top priority thing. And I totally agree with the idea of not going back to JavaScript and not trying to do React. Another person who's trying to do something quite similar is Mark Nadal. He's the creator of Gun.js, and he's starting to do something called secure render. So people are starting to realize that we need to get off the web. But fundamentally, the web is crippled, and it's crippled for this reason. There's no reliable local storage. Yes, there's a local storage API, but it doesn't work if you go into private browsing mode, and if you clear your browser cache, you lose everything. You can't do local storage on the web, which means you can't do private keys, which means you can't do anything to do with encryption. So here's the thing, right? Although people will spend all this money on AI builders, it isn't going to fix any of these underlying problems that we have. Existing platforms are fundamentally broken, and there's no way around it. There's no way of fixing them, because fixing them means changing the whole monetization policies of the apps and the platforms, not to mention all the ads and the analytics and so on. So this is what it feels like today if you were to make an AI app with some new Silicon Valley tool. It's going to sit on this whole rotten heap of garbage. So I think what we need is like a real holistic rethink. We have to start from scratch. So what I'd like to do for the rest of the talk is present fresh ideas for what I would consider to be my dream platform if we were to start from scratch. And I have to state that these are only ideas. I can talk a lot of more detail about some more than others, because I've thought through some more than others. The AI thing particularly is still very fresh for me, and I'm still trying to get my head around it. But some of these other things I can certainly talk more about, maybe after this talk. Right, so the first idea is computers need to understand data. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean that I've played with all of these technologies over the years, probably plenty more. And the thing that they all have in common is that they treat data like this. They think of data as in terms of bits and bytes, right? You can pipe it, you can buffer it, you can stream it, you can serialize it, but it's still always bits and bytes. That's how they think about it. So what programmers have to do is take these arbitrary bits and bytes and squeeze them through various forms of transformation. So you're pulling it out of the database, you're reserializing it, you're putting it in some message queue, you're putting it through an API, sending it up to a website or mobile app, but you're transforming along the way. And what I've also realized is that there are a lot of common problems. The biggest common problem that I face as a web developer would be having to make these damn things. Like, you know, how much human time has been sunk into this sort of thing, right? And they're all different, and they all have to work in multiple languages, right? And people look at this, and this is only like 30% of the work. The real work is in all the error handling, both on the client side and the back side, and they all have to match up. So in 2008, I did a talk, and it was, I think, Web3 Summit, and it was all about the need for this. It was basically saying we need global data models, global data schemas, to solve really basic stuff, like really basic, like how do we validate a credit card? It's not that hard. Yes, I know American Express has got one extra letter, but it's a solved problem. We can do this. How do we validate a mailing address? Yes, I know Hong Kong's different, and in Florence you've got the same number of house, and it may be red and it may be blue. I know there are exceptions, but it's a solvable problem. How do we do invoices? How do we just do roll-ups where you've got different items and then we've got a way of calculating money and prices and so on? The problem was, until recently, there wasn't a way of storing this, because there wasn't, where would you trust it to go? Like Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud? But now we actually have. We've got a neutral, permissionless, censorship-resistant way to store these. And of course, I think that to actually do it properly, we have to make it work outside of Urbit, so that anyone with any language can take one of these schemas and import it into their programming language and get going with it. So I think we need some sort of global type registry. Thanks. If anyone knows of a system like this, please tell me, because I would really like to not, like, I don't think we should start from scratch if there is some work in here. I'm sure there is. There's enough bright people here. But here's the thing, right? It's not just about making sign-up forms better. That's just the beginning. The point with that, by the way, is that you'll be able to chuck these data models onto any screen, and it will just screen, and it will just render the form automatically. It's kind of what ABIs in Ethereum could have been if it had been a bit more thought out. Okay, so number 2 idea. The utmost respect for private data. This is not even a consideration for any platform that I've read. You know, they say that we're secure, but it's like, well, how are you enforcing this? Okay, so most websites look like this, right? And basically the deal is you go to the website and it says, we value your privacy, and then it tells you about all the ways that they don't. Okay, and all operating systems are no better, because they basically do something that's fundamentally unforgivable, which is allow any app or website to open any arbitrary TCP connection to anywhere in the whole wide world without you even knowing about it. And what this means is that every developer of every app can automatically see all the data that's going on through their app, which is something that most people don't think about at all. So I did this podcast recently with lovely network age people. I can't see any around, but and inside that I said that we basically got privacy backwards. We're basically controlling privacy by the sensors. We're allowing iOS to like have access to the microphone or the camera or something like that, or location. But this is not the answer. So what I'd like to do is propose something I'm sort of calling a privacy guard. And the idea here is that we're only obsessed with one thing, and that is the data that leaves the device. We don't care what sensors are activated. We don't care what app, what apps can see. We're just compared and obsessed with this one thing, which is my private data leaving my device? That's it. And we need to treat it as the most valuable currency, because you can always get more money, right? Like if you lose your money, it's a sad day, but you can always get more money. But if you lose your privacy, your date of birth, and all of this, it leaks onto the internet, it's done for. So the way this, I think, will work is, this is my really bad render so far, but it's going to pop up like at the operating system level. This is the key thing, right? It can't work at the app level. But at the operating system level, whenever any of your private data is about to leave, it pops up and it says, would you like to send this to somewhere else? Okay? And by enforcing the fact that this is the only modal that can ever appear on the operating system, this is how we make sure people to pay attention. And of course, it can be tick boxes like, always trust this location, never ask me again, blah, blah, all that sort of thing. But you see why we have to understand data, because if we don't understand data, the operating system has no idea what's sensitive and what isn't, what is a picture and what isn't. Okay, now once we do that, we're going to start having to re-educate the public, because right now, I read this article where people are putting their Alexas back in their drawers, because people are starting to freak out that Amazon's listening to them and storing everything, and they're also sick of being asked to review products that they've just bought, which I understand. But if we start controlling privacy at the network layer instead of the sensor layer, then it means we can re-enable voice assistants. We can be talking to our computers all day long, but that is processed locally. No data ever leaves the system. Another idea I want to share is called audit trail. So I said earlier about leaving the system. Well, I'm just going to Austin from Native Planet said, well, it's more about a bubble. It's like if you've got a series of connected devices that they're all encrypted and they're all trusted, then it's really about what data leaves that bubble. So let's call it bubble. And because the data out is valuable, we need to know where it came from and where it goes. So we need an audit trail. We need a log of all the data leaving your operating system. The nice thing is then we can actually build in monetization on top of that. We can actually say, for example, well, you can start doing deals basically with anyone who wants your data. It could pop up with something like this. Hey, would you like to send analytics data? And here's what you're going to get in reward. So nothing can leave your system without you expressly approving it. But when it does, that goes straight into the wallet. And I really do believe that either we make money from our data or somebody else will. That data is valuable. At the moment, we've been mined for it all of this time. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is called reputation as a primitive. Put the under construction in because reputation is such a multifaceted, difficult topic, and I don't feel like I've even sort of scratched the surface of this yet. But one thing I do know for sure is that authenticity is going to be really, really important. It's going to become impossible in the next few years to know if you're talking to someone real or not. It's going to be a problem that affects every dating app, every sort of job works app, anything like that. It's going to be absolutely impossible. And we're only probably 2 years maximum away of a phone manufacturer baking in something like stable diffusion models, hardware optimizing it, and making sure that you can take a photo and you can basically put anything into that photo, any person, you can change the weather, you can do anything. It'll be impossible to know. So how do we protect against this? Well, we need to start using cryptography to start digitally signing things. And I think it will go very quickly to digitally signing at the camera module level. And the good news with anything like this is that blockchains can help, of course. In the battle against what's authentic and not, we need to start recording a certain set of facts, like facts that are just global facts, absolute facts, and objective. I did talk a while back about how reputation is ultimately more valuable than money. And it's something I've been thinking about a lot, because we've got this staking and slashing DeFi primitive, but I don't think we're using it the right way. We're using it at the moment for money, but really the goal here and the sort of big brain idea is to start using this for reputation. Once you combine this with non-transferable points and some sort of vouching system, you now have the ability to do something like this, which is like, I can stay somewhere and pay the full price, or I can pay less money but stake some reputation. Okay? Reputation is, like I say, it feels like a tangled ball of wool in my hair at the moment, and I'm still trying to get to the bottom of it. But I also see this primitive as an interesting thing for such as kickback, which was something that Makoto started many years ago. The idea here is that if you want to go to an event and there's only 10 places, everyone pays 20 USD and you get it back if you return. But if somebody doesn't come, it all goes into a pot and it's shared and distributed to everyone else. And it's also going to be used for restricting access. Not everybody wants to receive DMs, but if you could say something like, okay, I'm only going to accept a message from someone who's got 20 reputation points on the line for me to slash if I don't like what they're saying, then things change. And if you really want some like major crypto alpha, do some thinking around this, because what you realize is that reputation is more valuable than money, and the SEC have no ability to regulate anything other than money. So, at the same time, we need to be super careful. You see how powerful this can be, right? And we need to really start thinking as sort of, I would say, technology elders, like how we live in a world like this where reputation is immutable and on-chain. It's going to happen, and we have to design this system carefully. It has huge, huge rewards, and it means that a lot of things will open up to people who don't have much money, but are just genuinely good people. But we have to be careful too. So one sort of basic rule is that everyone should have multiple accounts. You should be able to have, just like you do in MetaMask at the moment with HD wallets. And the most important of all is that they should never ever be linked to your biometrics. So the moment we start linking reputation to biometrics, it's game over, really. There's no way of having any sort of degree of redemption. I'm still trying to get used to what reputation means to me and what I think the power of all this is, and how does it fit with the need for authenticity in a world of, highly generated AI content. But this is my best bet so far. I see AI's digital abundance, a slew of new content, and blockchain as digital scarcity. It's our only hope in sort of working out where we need to put our attention, what is real and what is valuable. So I came with this slide, with this whole talk sort of mostly sketched out, and I didn't know at the time there was a project working on something quite similar. So I don't know where Stuart's gone, but I just want to give a shout out, because anyone who works on this with the right intentions deserves some recognition. So amazing. The next thing I want to talk about is monetizing curation. So right now, people can only really make money. When I say people, I mean non-programmers can only make money online doing one thing, which is like making stuff, like making videos, making TikToks. However, right, what do all of us do on our computer every day? We're feeding the machine continuous data. We're liking stuff. We're going to something like a Kindle, and we're reading so many chapters every night. Well, what time are we reading? When do we stop reading? What page does everyone stop reading this book on? All that data is collected by Amazon and sold back to the publishers. The thing is, you're training their AIs and not yours. And normally, it's in exchange for some sort of ads or some sort of like way of keeping you on the system. So this is the thing that Seth talked about ages ago. I totally agree with it. But I call this idea lenses. And it's basically based on this idea that we're going to really be inundated soon of what we're going to need to know to say what is worthy of my attention. Because that is the question to ask always, like what is worthy of my attention? Now that we understand data because of the global type system, we can start taking all of these things and basically figuring out how we start hinting and coding this stuff. And then we can start training a personal model, our own algorithm. We can then take our lens and combine it with other people's lenses, like institutions, friends that you meet on Urbit, in real life, and so on. And then you can start overlaying them. So you're now looking through all the content that's been filtered automatically through your own combination of algorithms that you get to curate. I see this as a bit similar to going to the opticians and having those lenses slid in. A bit like with Logic, where you can mute and solo different tracks, you'll be able to mute and solo different lenses. So you'll be able to see through the eyes of a particular person. And of course, it's going to happen. That lens will become some sort of NFT that represents your tastes. And of course, whenever that happens, you know what's going to come next. Celebrities are already selling their Instagram filters. They're definitely going to be selling this sort of thing. Lenses enable relative ratings, which, as was talked again, it's just such an amazing group of people here. But relative ratings is the way to go. Like Google kind of buries them down here, and if you do click onto that, by the way, you'll see some like absolutely lame thing about like you like bikes, and you know they have bikes. You know, it's just no attempt at all. But really, what we're trying to achieve here is transparent, personalized algorithms, and transparent is the key because you also need to know what you're not seeing. You know, it's fine taking a stream of like Nostra feed and saying there's 1,000 things here and we're not showing you 20, but you need the option of knowing that and knowing what you're not seeing. And of course, we need to be able to preserve privacy throughout all of this. This is an example of someone who pulled out the training data through Stable Diffusion, but it actually turns out they had to hit it with a lot of brute force to get there. So I really want to give a shout out to Seth. I think we're kind of on the same page with a lot of this, but you know, I'm just talking about this, whereas he's actually building it. So please do have another look at Portal, and if you're watching this anywhere else, get in touch on Urbit. So that's one idea. And another idea is composability is key. Now, this, I'm really preaching to the crowd here, so we'll hurry up on this one. But once our data lives in one place and is understood by the operating system, whole new things can actually happen. If we combine this with open protocols, well, as we know, once upon a time, the internet was an open place, right? All of this used to be open. And in that world, we had email. Email's the only real open source protocol that most people would know about. The rest is much more low level. And today, of course, you know, it looks a bit like this, right? One app and one provider. But things are changing. Nostra's coming along. Lens is coming along. Well, things that we can do with open protocols, I think, will really surprise people. And if you combine that with all your local data living in one place, like it does on Urbit, it gets even more exciting. So composability to me means blending different things together in the same screen. No longer do you need to go into Uber or Uber Eats and some sort of bike hire screen when you want to do that. You can combine those actions in one. You could even chain them together, right? We have to work out how we're going to do decentralized atomic commits, but it's possible. It went weird last time like this. Okay. But this is something deeper, right? It enables whole new types of businesses. And if you combine open protocols with decentralized services, which is the next thing I want to talk about, then we allow all sorts of new possibilities. So let's go back to this app for a moment. So Airbnb, if you sort of take the lid off Airbnb, you realize all of this is going on, plus probably like 100 other things. Each app at the moment is a front door to a vertically integrated stack. So that means it's one company, they have lots of teams, full-time people, some work on research, some work on disputes, and so on. Okay, but the Web3 model is exactly the reverse to this. Web3 changes all of this, because you don't have to build everything, right? In fact, if you're really smart, you can build your Web3 protocol in a way which is deliberately designed to make other people make money from it. That's the real sort of way to do it. So you can build your base protocol like this, and then you can have different teams building different matching engines. That would work for Airbnb, finding property, for example, and then different insurance providers which you can select. You can come to a mutual agreement about which insurance provider would we want to use. I really want to give a massive shout out to my favorite startup of all, which is Talent Layer. I met Kirsten, the founder, last year in ETH Prague, and we had very similar ideas on how the future of work will look. And after talking lots, I just thought, do you know what? You've got it. Like she's just amazing. She's got all the right values, and she's already built a lot of code out, which I encourage you to look into. So it's talentlayer.org. So if you're interested in the future of work and protocols that allow other people to make money from them, which is their genius here, please do look into this. In the world of different services, of course, it's going to be harder than ever to know what to use. Like, what do you combine together? And again, this is why lenses have to come first and reputation have to come first before we know which services are actually reputable and worthy of sending our data to. So everything's in order here. I also want to shout out to this essay called Hyperstructures, which is really, really great. This talks about a world where everything runs on these unstoppable protocols. It replaces Airbnb, it replaces Uber. All of the things that we use in the Web 2 world go away, and they're replaced by really well-designed protocols. Okay, now we come to the AI bit. So a little warning, I'm no expert at this. I can talk about web technology and crypto for a long time, but I'm very new to AI. A lot of you in this room are far smarter, I know. But this is what I know for sure. Programmers will write a lot less code in the future. All of this plumbing is going to go away. There's no need for it. And I think what you realize is that so many sort of hours have gone into front-end engineering, which is just basically like literally sending a string out from your server and transforming it until it arrives in the browser as a string, which is then parsed by the browser engine. It just doesn't make sense. So I think in 3 years' time, most front-end engineering will go away. And that's okay, you know, because it's never been about writing code anyway. This is what we have to remember. This is not a threat to jobs. This is about engineers being engineers again and doing the things that really make our types of brain very different to, I would say, most people who we find, you know, okay? So it's thinking about the trade-offs, the dependencies, the security. And ultimately, right, the most important thing of all is like, are we actually writing things that people value, that improve the human experience? The next thing I'm sure about is that people are going to love personal AIs. Doesn't take a genius to work out what's next for Microsoft. They've already got Bing. What do you think they're going to do next? It's very obvious to me that they're going to make Hotmail cool again, because Hotmail's going to read through all your emails and be your personal assistant, tell you when you're busy, and you'll be able to ask it questions about what you did in the past and things like that. They also own LinkedIn, so you'll be able to search for jobs, maybe within Bing and things like that. When an email comes through from from Hotmail, it will be able to autofill it and connect that back to LinkedIn data. I think it's inevitable that we are heading for a future where we do have these personal AIs. And if you haven't seen the film Her, it's just a must-watch, really. So Anthony, who's no longer here because he's just flew away, we were talking yesterday about his idea, and he calls it Datadog. And he says he wants the AI to behave like a dog, because he says that you train a dog, you make a commitment to a dog, you tell the dog what's good and what's bad, and in return, it's your best friend, right? And I like this analogy. It's like you will also be able to decide what breed of dog you want too. Do you want an AI that's going to really help you out and be more productive and be better at fitness and things like that? And are you the sort of person who likes to be talked to very strongly and strictly? Or do you want to just like a chillax AI that's going to let you lounge around on the couch all day long, feed you entertainment? People will choose their AI personalities based on what they're trying to achieve. The thing I'm really sure about is that everyone in the world, non-programmers most of all, want to know how to make apps. And the way to do this is to make sure they can do, is some sort of interactive dialogue, chat GPT style, and figuring out what the intentionality is behind the app that they want to make. You see that right now we're storing, like I say, just imperative code that we type into text files. That's not good enough. Like, we need to work out, like, what are you trying to achieve here? Like, what is the purpose of this app? And asking the right questions with a sophisticated, intelligent AI will help us achieve that and code it. Ultimately, although millions and millions and millions of dollars are about to be wasted on React generation and all this thing, all of that's irrelevant, because the only thing that matters is, can the AI output directly to bytecode? That's where we're ultimately going. We might as well start there and not waste time. In my opinion, Knock, because it's so beautifully simple, is a really amazing candidate for this. And the key to do this right is that there can't be any sort of escape hatch. You can't say we're going to auto-generate 80% of the file of the app, but the 20% that we can't do, you need to write in Hoon or get a Hoon expert. It has to go all the way. Like this, the winning system will go all the way here. Once you go directly to bytecode, it means you can be adaptive to different form factors. You don't have to do any unit testing. Eventually, you won't have to do any things like auditing because it will be written securely in the first place. The world's going to look like this. It's going to be your data that lives on one machine, coupled with some primitives that something like Urbit gives you, like basically identity and things like that, with a series of decentralized services with a disposable interface that's built on top of this stack, something that you've taught to the computer, you've wished into existence, and you're using, and behind the interface is all of this stuff, all of this good quality composable primitives. Now, I know at this point this sounds very far-fetched and impossible, but here's the thing, right? We don't have to try and make every type of app at first, because anything is better than nothing. All of these people who've desperately wanted to make apps all their life and have all got app ideas can't do anything right now. So if you can give them a system where they can just make a red box on the screen and make the red box move according to their commands, and maybe it takes in some data and spits it out and processes it, even if it's dead simple, they're going to be so delighted that they've made something themselves. They're going to want to tell everyone about it. The most important thing with all of this AI thing, of course, is who owns the models and where does it run? And for this reason, I can't see a better place to do this than on actual hardware you own and control yourself. Couple this with something like Privacy Guard, where you can be sure that your private data cannot physically leave the device. Well, it can physically leave, but it's going to have to go through a lot of difficult sandboxes to get out. And I think we may be onto something. I talked at the beginning about the boxes model, how everyone is so obsessed with one app equals one box. Once we start really realizing that apps don't have to make equal squares anymore, we can free ourselves from this way of thinking. And we can now start letting the data break free in more ways than one, right? So what do we get if we combine all of these ideas that I've talked about together? Well, we can experiment. We can experiment on something brand new. So I'm calling this concept Liquid UI, and it is just a concept right now. But it's a way of moving away from apps and taking the name apps and saying, look, we're not going to call it an app, but we're going to call it instead an experience. These experiences will be composable by default. Everything can appear on one screen, so you can have ability to book a taxi and hire a bike and get some food, all off the same screen. They'll be personal by default, just like native UI was the plan, basically that you get your own colors, your schemes, your own fonts. Of course, that's the way it's going to go. This is Mid-Journey making some UIs. This is just the first year, right? Imagine even just next year, how this is going to be different and more advanced. It's not just about looks either. It's about how much data do you want to see on the screen. Some of you engineers, you do want really data. What's the word? Data, full of data screens. I can't think of the word. Data-rich screens. And others, of course, they just want very simple interfaces. But you get to choose that. You can talk to the AI and say, add this, take this away, make it more complicated, and so on. Of course, it'll be contextual. The AI interfaces, the disposable experiences will know what you're doing, what your goal is, where you're going. Maybe they've read your email or something. It doesn't matter if it doesn't leave your device. So much is opened up, right? It's not scary anymore, as long as the data doesn't leave your device. And they'll be disposable. I came across quite recently this project called Mercury OS, which is the first time I've ever heard someone talk about breaking out of the app square model. So it's worth looking into. This is about interfaces that draw on the fly based on your focus and intention. I think there's something here. But if we're going to make a new interface, we also need a whole new set of principles. And the most important thing here is that we need to start with humans in mind. My first principle would be no modals allowed. The only modals that should ever appear are things like privacy guard and when you want to make a trade to sell your data or something like that. It will be literally impossible to make another modal from the app layer. Respect for muscle memory. If anyone knows this story, just before winter struck last year, Tesla changed from version 10 to 11, and they took away the seat heaters, and they changed the layout of all the buttons. And to say everyone was annoyed is an understatement. The problem is, of course, when you're driving, you remember where things are by muscle memory. And we do that all the time with apps. There's nothing more frustrating than downloading the update and everything's moved around. So it's not to say we can't ever change anything, but we need to respect it, and we need to design that in. No asynchronous redraws. You should not be able to click on something, and just as you're clicking it, something is loaded and it's moved down, and now you end up hitting something else. It should be impossible. Design it out from the beginning. You shouldn't be able to change your user interface without previewing it first. So it'll say, hey, would you like the new version? Someone's worked on it. Do you want to see what it's like? Yeah. Try it for a little while. Accept it or decline it. Either way, even if you don't like it, you should be able to go back in time and go back to the interface you were using 3 months ago. And maybe that can send the developer a message, or if this is an AI sort of composed thing, it won't matter. But the point is that everything should be able to, you should be able to go back in time and see the screen as it was. Ideally 2 years ago, right? Why not? And the next concept is forkability. So in a world where every interface is disposable, of course some people are going to prefer human-designed experiences, good designers who thought through the whole thing and done a really good job. And so something like this, it's very basic, but imagine this idea, by the way, is cards. You'll see it in a second, but the cards, my initial idea is that you start with verbs at the bottom, and the cards sort of stack up. Still thinking this through, you'll see in a second, but if every card was forkable, and you see someone else's card and you like the way it's designed and the looks and the colors and all that, but you could just instantly fork it and start using it on your own machine, and then someone else can fork that and start improving it and changing it. This is the way it needs to go. And I say this because I've been to so many co-working sites in my life, and they're such lonely, soulless experiences where everyone's in their laptop and they don't talk to each other. But imagine if you could enable collaborative design by default, where anyone can start working and riffing on interfaces, and it becomes something that's enjoyable for the first time. Recursive monetization. Somebody needs to be paid for all this, for sure. So we need to figure out, is it going to be one-off payment, subscription, token model? But either way, if multiple people have forked an interface and made that experience better for humans, then everyone should be able to get paid down the line. It should just be automatic. And then finally, it's obvious by now that there are way more mobile phone users than there are laptop users in the world. And although we're all very lucky that we all got lots of money here and we can all have laptops and all the rest of it, most of the world isn't like that. And it's really time, I think, that we start prioritizing mobiles first and laptops second. So I started talking to Austin about literally 2 weeks ago, and I started talking about some of these ideas. And he said to me, hey, I've got this amazing industrial designer. It's a guy who designed this box. Would you like me to just see if he's interested in mocking up some of these ideas? And I'm like, yeah, sure, go for it. Wasn't really knowing what would come from it. So I sent through a list of these ideas just in a text file. And I'm happy to show you the first possible render of a new Urbit phone based on these ideas. Let's see if it's going to play, right? Oh, I pressed play. You have to play. You have to play. It's play. So imagine this is a native Planet Urbit phone that you own and control. So here we've got the card model. Now this is coming from the top down. I still think it needs researching whether it's best top down or bottom up. But the key is that we've broken out of the app model. We're no longer in one square. We're combining multiple things together. We're booking things. We're booking taxis and so on. And we're using verbs at the bottom to decide what the next card is and what the next interface is. Down here, it's very hard to read, but these voice commands. So like make the map clearer, book a ride for that trip. And the brief for this design was to do things that you can't do in a regular phone. And there you go. At the end, you see where you pull down? You can always go back to where the screen was 2 days ago by just scrolling back. Really, really want to give a big shout out to David. I literally sent him a text file with ideas and he made the whole thing himself. So David is the industrial designer for Native Planet. What a star. Okay. To wrap up. In 2007, obviously iPhone came out. And as we know the story, it's very well told. 2 companies refused to realize that this was a big change, a sea change that would affect the entire industry. They hung on to their existing product plans. They refused to get rid of their hardware keyboards, and both of them eventually died. Android, on the other hand, they had made a phone with a hardware keyboard because it was the only type of phone that anyone had ever seen until then, the only smartphone. But unlike Nokia and unlike BlackBerry, they realized that something big had happened, and it's time to cancel everything and start again. So all their future phones after this one would have no keyboard and instead a touch screen with a keyboard on the screen. I feel like we're in a big decision point here for Urbit, because so far we've spent time describing what Urbit isn't. We tell people that Urbit isn't big technology, Urbit isn't some sort of service that's going to steal your data and monetize it behind your back. It's not going to, act in some sort of malicious way. And, don't get me wrong, this has really led to some great user growth over time. And of course, as all these, as the original Earth, as the Web 2 world continues to have all sorts of data breaches, and it's obviously inevitable that this is just the start. And as censorship comes to these Web 3 interfaces like Uniswap with the OFAC sanction list, telling them that you can't, trade from different countries, and as DAOs start moving to Urbit, all totally predictable, totally going to happen this year, that usage of Urbit is going to go up, no doubt about it. But I also think it's about time we start telling people what Urbit is, not what it isn't, and think about what it actually can be. In my mind, it's very obvious that it can be a private personal AI assistant that really has got your back. It's not just saying it has, it's coded in a way it literally can do nothing else. It's sandboxed very tightly. And a way, potentially, I hope, for everyone, coders and non-coders, to create apps. Because ultimately, people don't buy hardware. No one's going to buy the Urbit phone if it's just a shiny orange thing. They're going to buy the experiences that they can get in the same way that people buy games, not PlayStations. So we need to create those experiences. And we need to make incredible experiences that you simply can't get anywhere else. Now, I'm really brand new to Urbit. I met Ted at Bogota and really got Urbit pilled in a matter of hours. So, you've got every right to say, go away and don't come back, But maybe, just maybe, right? If this is the only sane place to do personal AI, literally where else can you do this? And the only place that you can make everyone, to allow everyone to make an app with integrity, so that app is actually theirs, really theirs, then maybe we have got a duty to do more here. And sorry. Big visions attract big help. And that help is going to come in the form of capital, which at the moment most of the VCs are told that they can only invest in AI because that's how they work. And with that money and capital will come very talented engineers who can help make this a reality. And if we do manage to pull this off, then the millions of people who've had ideas to build apps but had them on hold since the App Store first came out will finally get those apps made. Thank you.